about Charlotte Despard. Charlotte Despard was a wealthy, upper-class Victorian widow who in 1895, at the grand old age of 50, left her large, comfortable home in Esher, Surrey, and went to live in one of the poorest districts in London, 9 Elms, near Battersea, not very far from where we are now. She made her home there, in a little terraced house, hemmed in between railway lines, amidst the noise from the candle factory, surrounded by the smell from the brewery, and with the constant tang of coal dust in the air from the steam trains. Why? Why did she move there? Because Charlotte Despard wanted to make a difference to the lives of the people she had begun to care about. She set up a health clinic in her front room for the new mothers and their babies. She arranged hot school dinners for the hungry school children. And she created a chill-out zone in her home for the young lads to keep them off the street. Charlotte Despard cared for these people. But it was the workhouses that bothered Charlotte Despard the most. She visited the women and the children in the workhouses, and she was appalled by the conditions in which they lived. Their food was disgusting, the smell was rank, and the supervisors were big, fat bullies. Charlotte Despard was outraged. She complained to the Guardians, but her complaints were ignored. Charlotte Despard was even more outraged, so she made it her business to fight for justice. She was 52 years old. She didn't turn a blind eye. She didn't behave like a typical 19th century woman and move on quietly to some other good cause. Instead, Charlotte Despard roared like a lion. She shook the board by the scruff of its neck. She challenged the status quo. She forced those men to listen. Charlotte Despard made a stand, and the conditions in the workhouses were improved. But that wasn't all. Charlotte Despard realised that it wasn't just the workhouses that were corrupt. She was struck by the injustice of the system where women who paid their taxes had no right to vote. And so, well, Charlotte Despard had passion. She had guts. She had attitude. So she committed herself to the campaign for universal suffrage. Who marched with Millicent Fawcett? Charlotte Despard. Who plotted with the Pankhursts? Charlotte Despard. Who rallied the crowds in Trafalgar Square?
Charlotte Despard!
Yes! And for her beliefs, at the age of 64, Charlotte Despard was thrown into Holloway Prison twice. As you will know, in 1819, the vote was given to women over the age of 30. 10 years later, in 1928, the vote was given to all women over the age of 21. Mission accomplished. So, what did Charlotte Despard do then? What did 77-year-old Charlotte Despard do then? Did she hang up her banner and retire from public life? Oh no! Did she sit back in her chair and put up her feet? No! Did she settle by the fire and take up her knitting?
Oh no!
No! Charlotte Despard continued to fight for what she believed in. Right up until her death, at the age of 95, she continued to support the disadvantaged, the underprivileged, and the disenfranchised. Why? Because Charlotte Despard had a vision. She dreamt of a society built on equality and justice, a society built on respect for all. Even in her old age, Charlotte Despard channeled all her energies into making this vision a reality. Listen to this. In her late 70s, she moved to Ireland to support the struggle for independence. In her late 80s, she travelled to Soviet Russia to study communism firsthand. And in her 90s, she would have gone to Spain to fight against Franco's fascist regime if she hadn't been too frail to travel. So, what is the relevance of Charlotte's story to today? To you, and to me? Charlotte Despard is an example of the spirit of activism. She is an example of someone who refused to be silent. She is an example of someone who said no. An example of someone who moved people to action. An example of someone who said no, now. Charlotte Despard was a woman with courage, conviction and integrity. She started her work in her 50s. She continued to campaign through her 60s, 70s, 80s and into her 90s, taking risks and putting herself out there. Charlotte Despard shows us that age doesn't matter. Charlotte Despard shows us that it's never too late to make a difference. Charlotte Despard shows us that it's never too late to say no. Now! Woo!